how a single noise revealed the criminal living in her house the whole time. Like, comment, subscribe. If you think you could handle discovering someone inside your house without ever seeing their face. Most stories begin with a crime scene, a suspect, or a victim already identified. But this one begins with a noise, a single, soft, almost forgettable sound that should have meant nothing. Yet for 28-year-old Claire Winston, that tiny sound would unravel the most disturbing hidden intruder case her city had ever seen. She lived just outside Portland, Oregon, in a quiet 2-story rental house that she'd moved into after a messy breakup. It was supposed to be her fresh start, a place to reset, breathe, and rebuild her life on her own terms. The house was old, built in the late 1940s, with creaky floors and thin walls that sometimes echoed. Claire was used to the little quirks, the whistling window in the hallway, the radiator that never quite shut off, the refrigerator that buzzed as if it were clearing its throat. But at 2:17 a.m. on a Wednesday night, she heard something she had never heard before, a slow, dragging sound. Not like a pipe, not like a floorboard, not like a raccoon on the roof. This sound came from inside. Claire sat up in bed as the noise traveled through the ceiling above her, a soft scrape, like fabric pulling against wood, followed by a faint thump. Her heart jumped, but she forced herself to stay calm. Old house, drafts, settling. That's what she told herself. Then she heard it again. This time it was clearer, more deliberate, like someone trying not to be heard. Claire's breath locked in her chest. She listened hard, the kind of listening where every muscle in your body tightens and every sound becomes magnified. The scraping moved slowly across the attic floor, then stopped directly above her bedroom. Silence. Cold. Cold. "We're sending officers to your location now. Stay in your room with the door locked. Do not try to investigate." Claire sat on the floor with her back against the dresser, knees pulled tight to her chest, staring at the door as if expecting it to turn. The minutes crawled by. At 2:32 a.m., police arrived. She heard their voices downstairs. 2 officers moving through the house, announcing their presence, checking rooms, verifying windows. When they reached the hallway, Claire cracked her bedroom door open and stepped out. "There's been movement up there," she whispered, pointing at the attic door. The older officer nodded. "We heard something when we came in," he said quietly. Claire's blood ran cold, so she wasn't imagining it. The 2 officers positioned themselves, one aiming a flashlight upward and the other reaching for the attic cord. The moment he pulled it, the attic door creaked open, unfolding down with a soft metallic groan. The ladder extended. No movement, no noise. The first officer climbed up slowly, cautiously, sweeping his flashlight beam across the attic. Claire stood back, her heart hammering. She watched the officer's light cut through the dust, catching insulation, wooden beams, and he stopped. "Hold on," he called down. The second officer tensed. "What do you see?" he asked. The officer in the attic stepped forward, crouching. His flashlight tracked across something on the floor. Something small, metallic, and completely out of place. He picked it up and held it toward the light. A key. A single, ordinary key. But attached to it was a tag. A tag with numbers and an address. Not this address. An entirely different one. The officer climbed down slowly, his expression tight. "Claire, this key doesn't belong here, and it's not for your house." "What does it mean?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. He looked at her, with a seriousness that made her knees weak. "It means," he said carefully, "whoever was up there, they weren't just hiding in your home. They were moving between homes." Claire's breath caught. The second officer stepped closer. "And if that's true," he said, "this isn't just a trespass case. It might be something much, much bigger. Both officers looked up at the attic again, and that's when they heard it. A soft, distant thud coming from deeper inside the walls. And in that moment, Claire realized something horrifying. They weren't looking for someone who had just escaped. They were looking for someone still inside. The officers froze when the thud echoed through the walls. It wasn't loud, but it was unmistakably close. Too close to dismiss as settling wood or shifting insulation. Claire instinctively stepped back, her breath catching as the reality sank in. Someone was still inside her house, and they had been living closer to her than she ever imagined. The older officer motioned silently for Claire to move behind him. "Stay back. Stay with me," he whispered. The younger officer clicked his radio. "Unit 4 requesting immediate backup. Possible intruder still inside the residence. Movement detected within the walls." The dispatcher's reply was calm but urgent. "Backup en route." Claire felt her legs weaken, but she forced herself to remain steady. She didn't want to fall apart. Not now. Not when every second counted. The officers spread out carefully, listening for more movement. The house seemed to expand with tension, every shadow stretching longer, every silence deeper. Then it came again. A faint shuffle. Not above, not in the attic. Behind the wall at the end of the hallway, near the small linen closet she had barely used since moving in. The older officer gestured toward it. "You hear that?" The younger one nodded. "Yeah, it's coming from behind the left panel." Claire clutched her arms, feeling her skin prickle. She had lived here for 7 months. She knew every room, every creaky stair, every stubborn cabinet, but she had never noticed anything strange about that closet. She watched as the officers approached it slowly, one hand on a flashlight, the other on his holstered weapon. The older officer opened the closet door. It was small, cramped, and filled with towels and cleaning supplies. Nothing unusual. But the sound came again. A tiny, almost imperceptible scrape, directly behind the wall. The younger officer pressed his fingertips against the drywall. "There's space behind here." Claire frowned. "Space? What kind of space?" He stepped back, observing the dimensions, the positioning, the way the closet jutted slightly into the hall. "This closet is too shallow. The house's blueprint would have had a deeper recess here. Someone sealed off part of it." The older officer exhaled slowly. "That means there may be a crawl space or a hidden passage directly behind this wall." Claire's heartbeat thundered in her ears. "A hidden passage? In my house?" The older officer turned toward her gently, but his expression was serious. "It happens more often than people realize. Older houses sometimes have unused service tunnels, old storage cavities, even illegal renovations that leave hidden pockets of space. And intruders, they take advantage of those. Especially ones who know how to avoid being seen," the younger officer added quietly. The implication hit Claire like a wave. Whoever was inside her home hadn't just slipped in for a night. They had been here, moving quietly, learning her patterns, watching her. Before she could react, the backup officers arrived. 3 more uniformed police stepped inside, and the house filled with a mixture of low voices, radios, and methodical orders. They began canvassing the perimeter again, but now with renewed urgency. One officer inspected the basement. Another checked the windows. A third scanned the exterior walls for any signs of forced entry. Inside the house, the original 2 officers focused on the linen closet. "We need to confirm what's behind this wall," the older one said. "But we do this carefully. If he's inside there, he'll know we're trying to access it." The younger officer nodded, then leaned in closer, placing his ear gently against the wall. For several seconds there was nothing. Then, a whisper of movement. A breath. A shift. A quiet pressure against Tuan, the other side of the wall. Someone was there, listening to them. Claire's stomach dropped. She felt exposed, violated. as if every private moment she'd lived in this house had been watched through cracks she never knew existed. The older officer spoke quickly to the backup team. "We need the thermal scanner from the car, now." Within moments, one of the new officers handed him the device. The older officer placed it against the drywall, his eyes narrowing as the screen lit up. A clear, distinct heat signature, human-sized and motionless, but undeniably present. "Got him," he said in a whisper, his voice tight. Claire felt the air leave her lungs. Someone had been behind that wall, inches away from her towels, her clothes, her daily life, and she never knew. "Claire," the young officer said softly, "we need to move you outside. You shouldn't be in here for this." She nodded numbly. "Is he dangerous?" The older officer hesitated, then answered truthfully. "We don't know yet, but anyone who lives inside a stranger's house for this long without being seen, that's not normal behavior. It's careful, it's calculated." Claire felt her skin crawl. She backed away slowly, following one of the backup officers down the stairs. Every step felt surreal, like walking through a dream she couldn't wake from. She stepped outside into the cold, early morning air. The sky was still dark, but faint hints of dawn hovered at the horizon. Police lights cast blue and red reflections over her front yard, turning her quiet street into a crime scene. Across the lawn, neighbors peeked out of their windows. Some had opened their doors, watching from porches. Claire felt exposed under their gaze, but she didn't care. Her only thought was that someone had been hiding in her walls, someone who could have come out at any time, someone who might have been watching her sleep, cook, shower, or cry on the nights when life felt heavy. She couldn't stop shivering. Claire felt the world tilt beneath her feet. The officer's words echoed inside her skull like a slow-forming nightmare. "You weren't the first." She stared toward the house, her house, but it no longer felt like a home. It felt like a trap, a maze built around her without her knowledge. The early morning air tasted metallic, sharp. Police lights flashed across the windows as officers entered, exited, and coordinated their search. The house looked alive with movement, but the one person they needed to find remained invisible. The younger officer approached, holding a sealed evidence bag containing a small journal, the intruder's notebook. "Claire, you should come with us to the car. We need to ask you a few more questions about the entries." She hesitated. The thought of reading anything written by the person who had tracked her every move made her stomach knot. But she nodded and followed the officer toward the cruiser. He opened the back door and motioned for her to sit. The interior smelled faintly of leather and disinfectant, grounding her just enough to breathe. The officer sat beside her and opened the notebook. "It's organized," he said carefully. "More organized than we expected." He flipped to a page about a third of the way in. Claire saw neat handwriting, dates, times, observations, ordinary daily actions she didn't even remember doing. Claire turns lights off at 10:51. Claire checks the front door twice before bed. Claire leaves kitchen window cracked for airflow. The officer turned pages slowly, letting her absorb the weight of each detail. More notes, more routines, more evidence that someone had been studying her with unsettling patience. Claire forced herself to breathe through the shock. How long has he been watching me?" The officer exhaled. "Based on the earliest entries, maybe 3 months, but that's only what's worse." Detective Hale nodded. "We believe so. In some instances, homeowners reported odd noises, disappearing items, open cupboards, but no evidence ever surfaced. Until now." Claire felt the weight of his words pressing against her chest. The intruder wasn't improvising. He was experienced. Then, a shout from the garage. "Detective, over here!" Police surged toward the sound. Claire and Detective Hale followed, stopping in the garage doorway. An officer pointed upward with his flashlight. A set of fresh boot prints marked the dusty wooden beam near the ceiling. Another officer climbed a ladder, scanning a narrow overhead space. "He went through here," the officer called down. "But he left something." He reached into the crawlspace and pulled out a folded piece of paper, handing it to Detective Hale. The detective opened it, his eyes narrowing. Then he turned the paper toward Claire. Her breath hitched. It was a map, her house, perfectly drawn in pencil. Every wall, every door, every hidden space, and marked in red ink, a path, a line that traced through the attic, behind the walls, down into the basement, and out toward the back of the property. An escape route. The intruder had planned his movements. He knew exactly where to go, how to stay unseen, and how to disappear when the time came. Detective Hale folded the paper. He's leaving. He wants to avoid confrontation. Claire stared at the map. So, he just gets away? No, Hale said firmly. We have units surrounding the block. If he exits the house anywhere, we'll see it. But even as he spoke, Claire felt uneasy. This intruder had avoided detection for months. He had navigated the walls of her home with precision. He knew every corner, every crawl space. And now they were trying to catch him in broad daylight. Officers continued searching, expanding their perimeter, checking every shed, tree line, and somewhere, in another quiet neighborhood, another single noise might soon be heard by someone else. Just loud enough to be noticed, but soft enough to be ignored. Claire looked at her house one last time, and she knew. This case wasn't over.